Welcome to the Mind Your Own podcast with Aaron Sorensen and Sasha Durkin, where we stick to sports, except when we're not.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Mind Your Own podcast. I'm Erin.
I'm Sasha.
And I totally, if you're watching this on YouTube, you saw how I just greeted the camera. If you're listening on podcast, I'm so sorry you missed that moment.
Probably should go check out the YouTube video.
Hello. I've had a week with how I've been introducing videos. Our recruiting question of the week video, I was like, hi. And I don't know why I did that, but it was like Monday. I was just like, hello, hi. So, hello. My brain is mush this week, to be completely honest with everyone. I am like feeling the crunch of football season arriving before I know it. And it's one of those things where people are like, are you ready? And to be honest with you, I think what is the biggest thing with this year is no, I'm not, because this feels like a make or break year in so many ways. And I'm just like, all right, it's going to be what will be, will be. But yeah, it's a little, I can tell I'm stressed. Yes. It's fine. It's fine. How are you?
I'm all right. I think it's one of those, it feels like every week is a week.
A week.
You know what I mean? Anymore. And so I feel like sometimes I'm hanging on by a thread. But we're going to get through all of this.
Yes. And I don't want to say like, okay, this isn't what we're going to talk about, but maybe at some point we will. There was a TikTok that I was watching this morning, and I needed to spend more time with it because she was breaking it down into multiple parts. Yeah. And it's all about how, at this point in the pandemic, so like the pandemic shifted things in the way that people were like, oh, working from home is a good thing and all of it. So we kind of had this like swing to one side of people like knowing their worth with work, trying to find some balance. However, now, almost 2 years into it, it's swinging so far the other way where people are so incredibly burned out to the degree that, like, everything is just, it's bad. And so I was kind of, like, realizing that, like, the exhaustion and just the constant needing to work and feel productive. And in fact, so this week, I had a day where I didn't have any meetings. The only day this week I had zero meetings. And I was like, okay, this is great. And I found myself trying to fill my time with work where I was like, you know what? I need to be stepping back for a moment and realizing like my life is about to get incredibly busy. I'm going to be working well over 40 hours as I do most weeks anyway. Like, why am I sitting here in a time where I have a moment to breathe trying to fill my time? Right.
And yet I think that it's been a hard differentiation for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I think that working from home I always reference that Cards Against Humanity card. Like, good in theory, kind of a mess in execution, or however it is read.
Yeah.
But, like, after so much time, I think that it's really hard to then separate yourself from work.
Yes.
Because when you're at home, you can just kind of work when, you're still being productive, but you can also get other things done. And then going back into an office setting so that when you get home, your home has essentially become your office.
Yep.
And it's been difficult for me to also shut that off. Like, my husband called me out on it the other day.
I mean, that's not a bad thing.
And I was like, you're right, actually. Mm-hmm. And then we had a meeting the other day that then, like, it was like the universe was like, yo, knock, 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 knock. Pay attention to this because you're neglecting it. But we had a meeting about, some things that we need to implement in terms of, what is this stuff?
The internet, the webs, the computer.
Equipment. There we go.
I just started naming things. I'm just like...
And I was like, you know what? I have to be able to have a laptop at home because I work so much off hours. I'm like, admitting that out loud, but yeah.
We could honestly, and maybe we do a separate episode entirely on that, because I feel like we could, because the thing against my better judgment for this week, and honestly maybe I'm just adding like stress to my life, that like we're talking about stress and maybe this is not what we want to do, but again, against my better judgment, I want to discuss something that has been big in Husker land this week, and I briefly, I felt like Sasha and I could have really quickly started talking about it off episode, so like we're going to try to get into it here. So when we're talking about schedules and everything else, earlier this week, for Nebraska media, we received our football schedule through fall camp, a little bit of an idea of kind of what we'll be looking at in season. But the biggest thing that stood out to a lot of people was that there will be a change with in-season availability. So through fall camp, we'll hear from the assistants, everything like normal or like what has been normal. And then in season, we will only hear from Scott Frost, offensive coordinator Mark Whipple, and defensive coordinator Eric Shenander. Other Nebraska assistant coaches will be available during fall camp, but not during game weeks once the season begins. Now, a little caveat to that, they will technically still be available, but they will only be doing their radio shows on Thursday night, so they'll rotate basically every 2 months. I do want to just say, if you're somebody who's like, well, look, they're still doing availability. Those Thursday shows is Nebraska interviewing Nebraska. Right. That would be like Hill Varsity interviewing Hill Varsity. Yes. Which is, that is what those radio shows exist for. Just like we have a radio show, and like when you have control over it, you get to ask the questions you want. And it is like, I get that. Like I'm not even mad about that. In fact, I'm not even really honestly mad about any of this. What I'm mad about is the conversation that took place around it, because I watched this sort of like dissolve into a group of people on Twitter coming after media members, going like, you're spoiled, you don't deserve the access, you're just complaining, and you're all terrible anyway, none of you are good at what you do. And then on the flip side, I saw media members being defensive against that. And like, I just took a step back and was like, there is no good conversation to be had in this moment. Yeah. So I'm not going, I almost tweeted a GIF of the kid that's like swinging, and then in the background there's a fire. Yeah. I didn't even do that because I didn't want people to read in. Well, right. I was like, because it felt like I'm just going to stay over here and be unbothered, yes, but everyone else is arguing. And here's just like, before we dive into this, my one little piece. If you are somebody who is one of those people on Twitter who's like, the media is terrible, here's the thing. Both sides of this can be true. We can say, hey, it stinks that there's limited access to these assistants throughout the season, while also saying, yes, we can still do our jobs and we still have more access than many programs do. And like, all of these things can be true at the same time. So I'm like, why are we just drawing this line in the sand and just like arguing back and forth across it for the sake of like who's right and who's wrong? And for me, I will share what my thoughts are on it, but like that was just like, I had to take a step back from Twitter, because I'm like, this is, honestly, I know that I don't think anyone was like coming after me personally, but when I see that like every single person in the media at Nebraska is awful, it's like, cool, I'm going to go take a walk around the block for a moment, because like, I hope that I'm doing a decent enough job where not everybody thinks I'm bad at my job.
I thought it was really interesting, the perspective that like the media is spoiled. It's like, I'm really sorry, and maybe this is too blunt to put out there, but you can come after me, whatever. I'm at Sasha72 on Twitter. Honestly, the amount of access that Nebraska media has had, which then is delivered and reported on, in my opinion, makes the fans a little bit more spoiled. If you want to get down to, brass tacks, I think that we, as just in Nebraska, have been incredibly spoiled. And fortunate, I guess maybe. Yeah. That's a better word than spoiled.
And I think, like, so here's my perspective, is I am disappointed in the fact that the assistants are not going to be available, and I'm going to share really quickly why. Yeah. Because for me, most of my bigger like feature stories that have ultimately come for Hill Varsity have come from assistants saying something that I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. So I'll give an example. Mickey Joseph during spring ball brought up the fact that Trey Palmer, coming from LSU, the food wasn't spicy enough here. It didn't have enough of a kick for him, and he's talking about how he needs to go to the store and get himself some different spices. And so when we were looking for a Q&A for the yearbook and Trey became an option, I was like, I had to ask him about this, because like, has he figured out like how to, like, does he bring his own spices to the to the training table and found out, he really likes to cook. He loves learning to cook. And so he's going, he takes most of his food home, and he says he gets a little chef in the kitchen, like making it what he wants. But like, honestly, I would not have known about that had Mickey Joseph not said what he did. And so I get it. We will still find stories. I'm not worried. We still get access to the players. But I do just want to point out, if you're somebody going, you're spoiled, you're just whining, for me personally, this means that there are potential stories that we may not know about, or we may not hear about until after the fact. Right. But we will miss out on some of these little moments that ultimately end up being, hey, I should ask more about that in the future, because I think the part that I understand is the fans who kind of were on that side of who cares about the access. It's because they want to win, and I actually agree with that. Winning is everything. And more than anything else that we talk about, yes, the winning is the piece that is the most important. Now, with that said, I'm kind of also of the belief that Scott Frost is supposed to be the CEO of this team now. Right. And so look, if things aren't going well, he does not have his assistants to help shield some of that critique and that criticism, because they've done a good job in the past of being the ones to come up and give explanations about their room, talk about what's going on. Yeah. It all now falls to Scott. So you can also make that argument where you're well, now he has to address everything. Yeah. But I also, this is why this is important conversation, because I also saw people point out where they're well, but at the same time, Scott is going to protect, the narrative that he wants as well. So think of Adrian Martinez, and when he was injured and he kind of made the joke about, I've heard he had all of these different things. And then 4 weeks later, he ends up saying he was, his jaw was injured and all this stuff. He actually then used the opposite side of it to make his point. And that is going to be something that, Scott's going to be on the hot seat when it comes to how people look at everything he says now, even more critically, or they're going to be looking at is that exact? So all of that to say, I don't care. That's fine. If all we get is Scott Whipple and Shenander, that's great. We'll also get players, and I'm not going to sit here and argue with people on the internet about whether or not I think that's fair or not. I'm just disappointed. I think I can also I can say I don't care while also saying I'm still disappointed.
Two things can be true at the same time.
They can be.
I also saw another conversation that basically was implying in some way that media getting these stories they're being selfish because maybe that'll affect the win-loss total somehow. And I thought that Mike Schaefer really put it really well. He goes, this might come as a shock to some people. The media's job is not to help Nebraska win games. My job is pretty much the exact same if Nebraska wins or loses on a Saturday. However, talking to coaches allows me to learn more, convey info better, and be more effective overall.
Yes, and I didn't like some of the responses immediately to him that were I know that your job isn't to win games. And it was I don't think that this isn't helpful. All it is at the same time, I think, so there are people who are there's just so much media, I hear way too much. That, I get it, but at the same time, anytime I go anywhere and Nebraska media shows up, people are wow, there's so much Nebraska media here. But Nebraska fans should at least feel somewhat fortunate that you do have a very strong media core, because you have the opportunity to have different, you can...
Entirely different.
Yes, so you can go read what Brandon Vogel says on a game, and you can go cross-reference that to something that Mitch Sherman says about the game, cross-reference that to something that Michael Bruns says about the game. You have this, honestly, as a journalism major, we talk about the benefit of having so many different points to, reference points when it comes to media, where you shouldn't just be consuming one anyway. And so for me, it's this is a benefit to all, that you have this opportunity to say, okay, I really like Hail Varsity's perspective on this, or I really like The Athletic on this, or the Omaha World Herald has a really good columnist over here. I just think that part of what is happening, and I've been in this industry long enough, specifically covering Nebraska and watching the ebbs and flows of football with coaching changes, is I think we've hit a point where this this is feeling similar to me to 2017 when people were frustrated with the results on the field, rightfully so, frustrated with maybe what they felt were some negativity in coverage. And when all of this sort of culminates into what got discussed this week, it becomes honestly just more volatile than anything else. Because to the people who are saying it is, and to the people who are going, well, I wouldn't care if some of this media just went away, I promise you that you would.
It's not there, and then you notice substantially that it's missing a piece.
Yes, and I thought Mitch Sherman has done a nice job through this. He has chimed in with people and had conversation with them about it. He said to somebody, this is a question that I keep in mind every day of what does my audience want? Obviously, fans want to see the team win above all else, but that's not the answer to this question. Media has no impact on that. So I am constantly asking that. And in fact, we actually had somebody on Twitter respond to Hill Varsity. Well, it's funny. I had to tell them, are we just searching our name on Twitter? And the answer is kind of. We have a column on TweetDeck that's just Hail Varsity. So whether you tag Hail Varsity or not, I will see it, which means I also see all the banned tweets when they talk about Hail Varsity, which is fun. But they said that Hail Varsity is very engaging. And I have to say, I try really hard to make Hail Varsity engaging. I want Hail Varsity to respond on Twitter, YouTube. Facebook is a little bit tougher sometimes to keep up with just because of the sheer volume of comments. And oftentimes it's a conversation among fans where it's they don't need Hail Varsity to chime in here. But even on Instagram, and I said this, we are admittedly not perfect. Things slip by. But that's the one thing is I try to be transparent. I try to communicate. And the reality is when I was watching this conversation, I'm I am never going to change everyone's perspectives. There are people who are just going to feel it is what it is. That was the thing that became abundantly clear to me this week is that there's just not going to be people. There are going to be people who sincerely feel you don't deserve the access that you have, and it's I can't change your perspective.
Nice to me, because what? You don't deserve the access you have. Is that because you're jealous that you don't have access? As an individual, that's, I don't know. Maybe that's way too broad, but that's always how that comes off to me. I just think that
for me, this is probably, I'm going to read what Damon Benning said, and then I'm going to offer a thought on this. He said, I think we way overthought this whole assistant coach thing. Surprised to see all the back and forth for 3 days. If they win, that will be the access story. If they don't win, it's on to the head coach and the coordinators anyway. It's too big of a year to worry about all the verbal continuity. They fix that. Yeah. Here's kind of my thoughts with that is where I'm at a little bit is the reality is what we're ultimately all coming to a head on is that this team has to win. Yes. And what we are saying, some of us in the media, is if things aren't going well, we have to heavily rely on Scott, Whipple, and Shenander to tell us what's going on. They may or may not be as forthcoming or honest. Now, I would say Whipple is pretty honest, so I'm not, and Shenander is too. But the players are going to end up being the ones who they're going to be the ones having to over-explain things. And so I don't love that. It does, but here's the thing. This was ultimately their decision to make, and as it was pointed out by a Nebraska spokesperson who was asked, Nebraska still gives way more access than many other, they're on path with other Power 5 programs, and so you can make the case just about any way. So kind of again where I'm at is I don't care. My job is the same. When fall camp kicks off next week, my job is the same whether I get to speak to assistants starting game week or not. I will still look for good stories. I will still look for context. I will still look for the best way to provide coverage for Hail Varsity readers, listeners, and subscribers, and to the best of my ability, whether I am given access or not. In fact, I have asked myself for a while what will happen through NIL, and if a player says, I don't want to do access, what do you do then? These are all little pieces of this conversation, and so for the fans who are going, you are not owed access. you're not wrong. I am not owed anything, but I do feel you are owed information, and so I am going to continue to seek that information because you still deserve that. You still owe that. Because as a reminder, these are state employees. These are public employees. You are still given every right to the information that we can provide. So all of that to say, like, I think Damon's saying, like, I'm surprised by all the back and forth. We are. The reality is, I can understand why two different groups of people are upset. I can empathize, honestly, with both belief points because I can empathize with the idea of who cares about the talking, just win. I get it. I hear you. And I can empathize, well, hey, this makes things a little bit harder to provide you the information. The context. I get that too. Honestly, it's going to be what will be, will be. Yeah. That's what this season is going to be. What will be, will be. And we will do our best. The thing is like, we are super fortunate to work around some incredible people in this industry, and I have no doubt that they are all going to continue to do excellent jobs. Some people may not like what they do or may not like what they write. Everyone has preference. I'm not worried about all of that. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm just like, it's going to be fine. This conversation is going to be a nothing burger in like a week. Literally. It's already a nothing burger, but I mean, it especially is not going to matter.
In that way, remind me of 2017, just because, like, does everyone remember 2017? I know that was only 5 years. 5 years ago?
Yeah.
Only 5 years ago. But so much happened, like, every single week leading up to the season starting. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not saying that is the case here, but to me, it very much feels that way. Like, this is going to be literally a non-story in, like, 10 days.
I just want to say, like, I remember, and I'm not going to say who the student athlete was because it's without them giving me permission to say their name, it's not fair. Yeah. But I do remember one thing that really stood out to me about that 2017 season was hearing a student athlete be like, this isn't fun anymore. And they weren't just talking about media. They weren't just talking about fans. They were sort of just talking about the pressure of like watching everyone argue around them. And they felt like everyone was on edge. Everyone was arguing about what should and should not happen. I mean, in that case, there were also people discussing like 3-4 weeks into the season who the new head coach was going to be. So for them, that was a really like, there was a lot going on. There was a lot just happening in their minds where I really was like, I kind of took a step back in that moment and was like, at the end of the day, like, this is supposed to be fun. Right. And this is supposed to be something that like we should, like, I'm so glad people are excited for the season. I am excited for the season. Right. But I just think I just think it's also important to sometimes take a step back and just be like, you know what? I can feel like I'm not owed I can feel like I'm not owed this because I just want the team to win while also acknowledging, but I can understand why the media would want to give me that information. Like, I think we're actually all more on the same page than like I think it came across on Twitter. And I think it came
across as like arguing for the sake of arguing.
Yeah, and I'm saying that for anyone. I'm not talking about any one specific person. Like, people were literally just like upset. Yeah. And I was like,
I get it, but like the thing about off-season is that it's really easy to focus on little minute details when in the grand scheme of the bigger picture, they don't actually matter.
No.
It's something to talk about, I think, is what it ultimately ends up coming down to, because the fans are really eager for, like, a game to happen.
Yes.
And media's ramping up for, to cover these things and putting together, like, how, if this thing happens, how are we going to cover that type of stuff? So, like, just calm down.
It's going to be, everybody just calm down. Here's the thing. Here's the reality is, and this is what I keep saying, is we are going to have a pretty good understanding of the way this season is going to go the first game against Northwestern. Yep. That is going to tell us pretty much most of what we need to know. I'm not saying that the season, like, a lot can change over a season, but I'm just saying that first game is going to give us a pretty good indication of, like, what we're up against here. So, with that said, I just think that, like, we all need to just kind of take a deep breath. It's going to be fine. As a member of the media and as Hail Varsity, all I can say is I promise you that we will continue to try to bring you the best possible information that we can. Yeah. And that has never changed, and that doesn't change now. It's totally fine. I do.
If you guys really want to argue about something, let's talk about if a hot dog is a sandwich or not.
Oh my God.
That's my challenge.
Actually, what happened to me with, so there's multiple, hot dogs are like a hot topic right now. Hot topic dogs. Because right now on TikTok, there was somebody who did the whole, like, is there dirt in the hot dogs? And a scientist legitimately did it. And she was like, I can conclude that the person literally dropped the hot dogs on the ground before they did. So, like, I hate the internet is what I'm saying. So this is going to be a shorter episode this week because, as you know, with this coming out, a day later than usual, we're just kind of getting into an adjustment of our own schedules. Yeah. Next week's going to be a bit of an interesting one because of Big Ten Media Days. Yes. We'll figure it all out. But I did just think it was important to bring this up really quick. This is not related at all to what we were talking about, but this is the stuff where when we talk about sports and what we should care about, this is something I believe that we should care about. The ESPYS just took place. As some people called it, sports prom. Aliyah Boston, who is the South Carolina women's basketball star, she helped her team win a national championship. She was the unanimous National Player of the Year, final four most outstanding player in 2022. She was essentially, what's the word I'm looking for? Snubbed for an invite to the ESPYs after being nominated for... She was nominated for an ESPY and then was ultimately not given an invitation to actually come to the ESPYs. She was given in a last minute invite and ultimately turned it down. And this is what she said as to why she decided not to attend the ESPYs. Aliyah said, to be nominated for an ESPY this year meant the world to me and my family. While it hurt finding out that they wouldn't be televising the category despite it being televised last year and had no intentions for me to attend, it hurt more to see ESPN change course and invite me only after social media caught wind of it. Respectfully, I declined. I'm used to this. It's just another moment when the disrespect and erasure of black women is brushed off as a mistake or an oversight. Another excuse for why our milestones and accomplishments aren't a priority this time, even now, 50 years after Title IX. To every black girl and every black woman, no one can take away what God has in store for us. You matter, you are valuable, you are a priority, you are seen, you are loved. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. She shared that on Twitter. Again, as she pointed out, the category that she was nominated for was not going to be broadcast, which was Best College Athlete Women's Sports. I think in a year, especially with Title IX, there's no reason that you couldn't have found time within that to make that happen. But I think this is just another opportunity for us to reflect on sort of why one, this podcast exists, but why we do what we do is it's really easy to overlook things and our own biases, our own there's so many reasons that somebody can overlook this. And when we talk about the reason that we need diverse voices and spaces, this is another reason why, because somehow this slipped by a number of people where somebody wasn't able to stop the train before it was moving and saying, hold up. Wait a minute, why aren't we, broadcasting this category, but even then, why are we not inviting one of the best collegiate athletes, not man or woman, in the country? Why are we not inviting this person to the ESPYs? At least extending the invitation.
That's just mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing. And so I give tons of credit to Aliyah Boston for her grace through this. I had an opportunity to ask her questions in Minneapolis for the Final Four, and she is an incredible human being. The word I use is that she is a force. She is going to continue to do great things, not only in basketball but beyond. And I always say I hope this is a learning lesson, but unfortunately it keeps happening. So I continue to hope it's a learning lesson.
Keep talking about it.
But we have to continue to push and ask people to be better, because if we don't, this is just going to happen again. So again, Paige Buchers, who won Best College Athlete Women's Sports last year, she was invited. They had the whole thing they had the whole thing broadcast, as many people might remember. She actually said in her speech to the incredible black women in my life, on my teams, to Breonna Taylor and all of the lives lost, the names I have not yet learned but hope to share, I stand behind you and I will continue to follow you and follow your lead and fight for you. So long story short, there's a lot of criticism. Dawn Staley at South Carolina has rightfully been very critical of this. I'm kind of pulling from a Yahoo Sports article, but again, we can do better. We should do better. And
do better.
And the only way we're gonna do it is if we keep having these conversations and bringing it up. And if it makes people uncomfortable, too damn bad. It's a good thing to make people uncomfortable. Somebody at ESPN right now should be feeling real damn uncomfortable. Multiple people at ESPN should be feeling really uncomfortable right now because this should not have happened. And I'd like to believe that it will not happen again. But unfortunately, we have not been shown otherwise.
Hopefully it happens less often, but it shouldn't be happening at all.
Correct. Well, like I said, we are going to be kind of a little bit as we sort of figure out our lives with the change of fall. Bear with us if things change a little bit in the coming weeks. But we will continue to have episodes. Yes. Just follow us on Twitter at Aaron Sorensen, at Sasha72. We'll say something. As long as the internet is not like yelling about things, and then like, who knows? I might just be like, see ya. Sorry. That was me this week. I was like, I kept coming back. It's like a guy walking into the room on fire with pizza, and I was just like, I'm gonna head back out for a few more hours. I'll check in and make sure everyone's doing all right when I return. But we do appreciate you listening and always being here. You can email us at mindyourownpodcast@hailvarsity.com. Again, I'm at Aaron Sorensen, at Sasha72. Go do some good things in the world. Say nice things to people. Challenge things, but be nice about it. Like, honestly, again, if I learned anything this week, we're all actually a lot closer on the same page. We're just arguing. We're literally
we're saying similar things. We're just using different words, and it doesn't mean that it's different.
Yes. We'll get there. It'll be great. It'll be something. What will be, will be. Maybe that's going to be the title of this episode. What will be, will be. All right. We'll be back soon. Thank you as always. Talk to you later.
Bye.
A Hurrdat Media Production.